Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Rossi. I am the current president for the Academy of Forensic Nursing. I'd like to welcome all of you that are joining us. We have a very large group in here today. We are very happy to be able to bring this to you in collaboration with our partner, domesticshelters.org. Just to give you a little bit of information, this is going to be a webinar. It's very different from a Zoom meeting in that you're all here as attendees and do not have the ability to join us verbally. However, we do have several options for you to go ahead and interact with us. Rita, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the next slide for us. If you hover your mouse down at the bottom of your screen, you'll notice that you have a section for Q&A. This is where we're going to ask you to go ahead and place any questions that you might have for our speakers. We also have a chat feature for you so that you can go ahead and communicate with each other. And we're asking everyone to go ahead and say hello and introduce themselves in chat. If you do have a question that you would like to speak to, we will try to go ahead and make sure that everyone gets their questions answered today. And I'm going to go ahead and hand this over now to our immediate past president, Diana Fagno, and ask her to go ahead and introduce our speaker. Thank you so much.
Great. Rita, if you will take yourself off mute, and I see you're advancing. This is an AFN work product. Please do not record screenshots of these webinars as they represent the Academy. Next. The views and opinions expressed. Whoops, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. We're all human today. Expressed by this presentation are not those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect any institution or organization and its partners or with the person's professional association unless otherwise stated. All pictures and photographs are used with permission. Next, yeah. This is your professional responsibility. We bring evidence of the topics discussed, but it's your responsibility as a licensed professional to seek out and understand and implement best evidence for your practice. And this changes daily, it seems. Next. So we have Rita Smith here, and Rita, will you go to your bio, please? There we go. This is my lovely Rita Smith. I'm so excited to have her today. I first met her a number of years ago at End Violence Against Women International at a conference, and I think it was in Washington, D.C., so that has been a couple years. Yep. She's nationally recognized expert in domestic violence, and she's been interviewed by hundreds of newspaper reporters, appeared on many local and national radio and television news shows, including Washington Post, USA Today, People Magazine, NPR, the Today Show, Good Morning America, and of course, Oprah Winfrey's show. She began her career in 1981 as a shelter crisis line advocate and ascended to lead the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence from 92 to 2014, where she established the original relationship between domesticshelters.org and NCADV. So she also doubles as a consultant to the nonprofit Teresa's Fund, which operates the domesticshelters.org, and she serves as a senior advisor to the National Football League on policy and training issues related to domestic violence and sexual assault. So it was with great pleasure that I turn this over to Rita.
Thank you, Diana. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with your members and the healthcare providers in your orbit. And first, I just want to thank you all as being frontline responders for this pandemic we're in. I know what the drain has been over the last year on you all, and I just so appreciate you being there for us and for protecting us. And I also believe that you are and can be frontline responders for domestic violence victims. When people come into your practice or your agency to get healthcare information or services, educating yourself about what those warning signs are can really be a way to intercept the violence that occurs. So thank you all for being there, for being an ally to this work, because we need everybody in the community looking. So domesticshelters.org is a service that was created by a Teresa's Fund, which is in Arizona private foundation. It is one of the fastest, or probably is the fastest growing online resource for domestic violence services and resources every year. We have just, the exponential growth has just been amazing. So when I originally connected with the Teresa's Fund as they were developing this idea, I got the concept of what it could do, but I had no idea that there was this niche of people looking for service information before they ever reached out the first time. And I think that's what we're seeing, is that people are seeking information before they actually try to access services. And we have a searchable database of over 2,800 programs, plus transition homes is what they call them in Canada. And we have created original content of over 800 articles, videos, lists, resources on our website now. And so it's, 2 to 3 million visits a year has been what we have been getting, which tells me that we're actually filling a niche that was desperately needed. So you go there, look for information. If you see a hole in what you feel like you're looking for, email one of us and let us know, and we'll try to create some content to help fill the need for education for you all. So we're going to send you out some polling questions right now, and then once you fill that out, we'll kind of give you the results of that and move on to the information.
So I've gone ahead and launched the poll. I'm going to give.
So this is good information to have, and many of you already work specifically with domestic violence survivors, or you know that. For those of you who think you don't, I would suggest you probably do and just don't know it yet. So for me, I'm thinking that if we can help you learn a little bit more about signs and symptoms that you might see, that you will start to recognize it and realize that you are in fact engaging with victims of domestic violence on some level. So did I move on to the next slide? Is that how we proceed from here?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we have about 79% feel like they can recognize gaslighting, about 12%, and then actually 20% say they either don't or they're not sure what it means. Okay. We have about the advocacy is ruling the day here. We have about 55% of the folks on the call here today are advocacy. So got to love that. And yeah. I will go ahead and stop sharing that, and you feel free to go ahead and move on.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. That's good information. So that's good. A few people who said they weren't sure what the term means. So what is gaslighting? We're gonna see if I can get this to move forward. So Webster has a definition of that, which is basically to attempt to make someone believe that he or she is going insane, as by subjecting that person to a series of experiences that have no rational explanation. So in another way of saying that is that it's a form of emotional and psychological abuse, a manipulation that abusers use to try to create doubt in the mind of their partner, making them question their own memory, their own perception, their own judgment, their reality, their actual reality. Gaslighting is particularly insidious, and I believe one of the more effective forms of abuse that abusers engage in. So it's over time, it's a repeated pattern. It's something that is conscious and deliberate that an abuser uses. They're using every method they can to try to control their partner's mind, or at least make that person not believe they can trust their own thoughts and feelings and actual visual sight, that they can't even believe what they see, so to speak. And it really isn't, every class socioeconomic, racial makeup of abuser will use this. Because it is effective and because it does give them the opportunity to reframe information in a way that's positive for the abuser and negative for the victim. And that is the point, is to keep the victim so off balance. We have a little video we're going to share with you just to kind of give you a visual of what that looks like. So Ashley, if you want to go from here. Okay.
Rita, we have a question. Why the term gaslighting?
Yeah, I saw that. And I think that our next slide is going to try to give you some history about why we call it this. So where does the word come from? Great segue. Thank you, question. So in the 1930s, there was a play written called Gaslight, in which the main character had as his goal to drive his wife crazy. And so, gas lights in homes used to be powered by gas. And so he would dim the lights. And then when she questioned it, he would just say, the lights are not changing. When I personally got familiar with it, particularly within the domestic violence movement in the early 80s, we were basing this on a movie that was made with Ingrid Bergman on this concept, Gaslight. In 1944, that movie was made. And so basically, the premise of that movie was that the woman was very wealthy and the man wanted to put her away so that he could get control over her finances. And so he would question her reality. He would tell her she wasn't remembering things correctly, and every time he would say something that we all knew as the audience wasn't true and that she should know wasn't true, the lights would dim in the movie. And so it was like we all knew she was being gaslit, but she didn't kind of get that. So I think it was a really powerful way for us to try to help people understand what gaslighting looks like, because it's like, the lights start to flicker. I wish there was something that automatic around victims of domestic violence who could see it, like visually see, oh, that's what's happening to me. So the kinds of things that are said to victims of domestic violence, to gaslight them, to keep them off balance, to keep them unsure of their own reality, is these kinds of things like, that did not happen. I don't know why you're saying that. That never happened. You're imagining it. I didn't say anything. You must be hearing things if they question a negative comment or something like that somebody might say, I never said anything. What are you talking about? They're constantly coming back. You know, sharing information on a daily basis that your memory isn't the best. You don't remember things well. You can't remember past 2 days. Why are you talking about that? Or you're just being too emotional or sensitive, or you're overreacting. It wasn't as bad as you're making it out to be. Abusers use all kinds of ways to undermine. You're weak, you're fragile, you have no sense of humor, you're just being paranoid. I don't remember it being that way. Abusers use all kinds of ways to undermine. Why are you getting so upset over something that small? I didn't, you must be hearing things. I never said anything. I don't know what you're talking about. All of these kinds of things are regularly happening on a daily basis. And so if you keep hearing that kind of message, if you keep hearing that your memory is bad, that you're not remembering things right, that your perception is off, that you're imagining things, that your reality isn't real, it can have a pretty strong effect on you. And I want to stop periodically to make sure that there aren't questions that we might want to try to answer as we go along. One of the things I have learned over the years that I've done this as long as I have is that I can share a lot of information, but what I want to do is make sure that the audience I'm talking to gets the information they're looking for. So if you have questions that you want answered, please put them out there for us so that we can try to address them within the context of the presentation. So
I have an interesting question from somebody. What if the abuser themselves has a warped sense of reality, causing the victim to question themselves and feel like they're going insane? It might not be intentional gaslighting, but is that still considered gaslighting?
Well, here's my perspective, my long perspective of doing this, having been taught and educated by survivors. And I am so very grateful that survivors have been willing to share their information with me and to educate me about what's true about their lives. But my sense is that most abusers don't have a very good perception of reality, that they have convinced themselves that what they're saying is accurate and true. And so, and that they will continue to use whatever methods are necessary to keep control in the situation. So if emotional and psychological abuse is enough to keep control of their partner and to make sure that they stay in charge, then that's what they'll use. If they have to use an additional kind of violence like financial abuse or physical violence, they'll add that into the mix. But most abusers, if you look at what they say to other people about the victim, it's not an accurate reflection of reality. It's not. I have worked with so many women who are just amazing human beings, and they came into the shelter just emotionally beaten down and insecure and unsure of themselves. And that's not who they were, but that's who he made them, who the abuser made them, most often male, but there are women who are pretty effective abusers as well. So I think that for me, I don't believe that abusers have an accurate perception of reality, or they wouldn't be hurting people they love. That's just my personal perspective. So there are abusers who do have mental health issues that may offset some of this, but that's an additional issue, whether it's substance abuse or bipolar disorder or whatever. That's an additional issue that you have to deal with in terms of the use and choice of violence. So That's kind of my answer to a question about, they're not tagged into reality. I don't think any of them are, if they're behaving in the way that they are to hurt people they love.
Have you seen gaslighting in text messaging? Even if there is evidence through text that a situation didn't play out as the abuser said? Have you seen anything with text messaging?
I think that through social media, through any kind of electronic, whether it's on the computer or on a phone, I think that abusers have gotten really, really effective at utilizing those kinds of ways of connecting and communicating, because you don't even have to be in the room anymore to undermine their reality. I mean, I can text you something like, "You were supposed to be here 5 minutes ago. Where are you?" When that might never have been the case. We might not have had an appointment set up for me to meet this person, but they can just put something out there that's like, "Well, you forgot because it's on my calendar." I mean, yeah, there are lots of ways that even through text messaging, somebody can undermine your perception of reality.
And can this be a parent-child, or does it have to be a domestic intimate partner?
I believe that gaslighting can be an effect that anybody can use. You can do it with friends. If you want to keep people off balance and you want to stay in control of a situation, constantly undermining their perception of who they are and what they know and what they believe and what they have said. I think it can be used in a lot of different situations. It's almost always used by an abuser in a domestic violence situation. They always gaslight in some fashion.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks for that. That was helpful. So the effects, as you might imagine, if somebody is constantly telling you something is true that's not true, and you know it's not true, but the more they tell you it's not true, the less you get sure of that. It creates a huge dissonance in your perception, cognitive dissonance for you, and it can make you feel like you're stupid, like you're crazy, like you have a bad memory, like you're not smart, you're not effective, you don't plan well. And it makes you more and more dependent on that person who is abusing you, because they're correcting you and helping you stay on track. They come from that perspective of, well, your memory is so bad. I knew I had to, whatever A was, I did B because, I had to keep you on track. And so I think that you may, when a patient comes into you or someone comes into you for services, you may be talking to somebody and they may say things like, "Well, I have a really bad memory," or I can't, I often misunderstand," or they use terms that make you question the reality, because in your interaction with them, that may not be true. They may have been very well informed. They may have been really accurate in what their assessment was of what they were talking to you about, but they say things about themselves that you may not have experienced, and you can reflect that back to them in a way that gives you more information about where are you hearing that. It's like, well, that's not my experience with you. I feel like you've been pretty accurate and pretty you shared a pretty good reflection of what's happening. Where do you think that perception of yourself comes from? If you can start to respond to those kinds of things, if it feels like it's off to you and it doesn't feel like it's an accurate perception of who they are, you can start to challenge that in a way that might be very helpful for them, because we don't want them dependent on the abuser for emotional support, because they're not going to get it. So that all of the different ways that an abuser will continue to undermine the person's ability to trust their belief and trust their memory whether it's denial or misdirection or contradiction or misinformation. It's just about keeping the victim off balance. It's about keeping them so unsure of what they know and what they feel and what they can see with their eyes, literally, that it really keeps them in power without having to do a lot of physical interaction to control them, because the physical interaction is what's against the law. So the more they can control somebody with these kinds of subtle, less obvious things that you can't prove with visuals, the more in control they can stay without putting themselves in danger. So I'll just stop for a second and see if there's anything we want to respond to.
One question is, what is the legal status in the States for a victim experiencing gaslighting and emotional abuse if there is little evidence? In the UK, she said it seems very difficult to get legal justice without evidence.
Yeah, they passed a law in the UK around coercive control, which is what a lot of these tactics fall under, is coercive control. It's a series of behaviors that I think Evan Stark first wrote about. And Evan was really clear. He's done this work and research for a really long time, for almost as long as I've been doing this work. I think Evan has written some very good books, done a lot of good research, but he was more concerned about the actual, for us recognizing the actual majority of behaviors that abusers engage in, which is abusers are much less physically violent for the most part than they are emotionally and psychologically violent. And so he wanted to start to educate people about the kinds of violence that you can't see, but that really have much more long-term impacts. For the most part, the impact of gaslighting, the impact of this kind of emotional abuse is lifelong if it doesn't get addressed. A bruise will heal, a broken bone will heal. You can walk away and not have that kind of lingering memory. But if somebody is undermining your ability to believe in yourself, to trust your perception, to feel strong in who you are, that can have an impact the rest of your life. And so it has mental health and physical health issues that can turn chronic for victims of domestic violence if they don't understand them, address them, and try to mitigate the damage. And so I think that, whether or not they're being successful in actually getting coercive control violations litigated in court is another issue. It's always an issue when you pass a law. We have that same issue here with restraining orders. We've had restraining orders forever in the United States, and trying to get them consistently implemented and violations responded to and have consequences for the violation of a restraining order. I don't think we've done a very effective job at that. So we have the law, but trying to get it implemented universally and then responded to if the judge would simply put a consequence on that violation of that order, I think we would have fewer violations of restraining orders. But I know that we have not had coercive control laws passed in this country, as far as I know. The implementation issue is another piece of the pie. Once you get a law passed, and then you have to figure out how you get the system to actually implement effective consequences. So,
are you going to talk about how to empower a survivor to trust themselves if they've been exposed to this? Is that going to be a part of your presentations coming up?
I can share ideas about that towards the end. Absolutely. I'm not sure if we put it in the concept of this so much, but I can certainly talk to you about what I think myself as an advocate might do if I were talking directly to somebody who is really experiencing the effect of gaslighting. I can certainly do that. So poke me if I don't. Poke me if I don't do that.
Thank you very much.
You bet. So the question is, why do they? They do it because, in my opinion, abusers abuse because it's effective. They want control, and so they will use whatever level of abuse and tactics are necessary to maintain that control. And there are some abusers who will go as far as lethal violence to maintain control over a person that they don't want to get away from them. And that's far too often that happens. But they want to ensure that the memories of the perception of what happened, the feelings about I'm not being treated well, that information is so undermined that they won't share it with anybody else, so that their veneer of being a good dad, a good father, a good husband, a great employee, that veneer is never sullied by what reality is happening behind closed doors. So they do it so they can maintain the power and control. And that somebody, even if they go talk to somebody else about it, that they won't be believed because they'll have them so off balance that they won't be able to share effectively what's happening to them. And undermine any potential that they might be able to get away and to succeed as they get away. Abuse is, that's what abuse is. It's about power and control. It has been and always will be. And the reason we know that is because back in the 80s, the Duluth Project, when Ellen Pence was running it, had lots of conversations with survivors in groups, and asked them what it was like to be abused, what kind of tactics were being used to control them. And this power and control wheel is one of the most effective ways of trying to get people to understand all the different ways that an abuser can engage to keep control in a situation. So if you're not aware of this, this particular graphic, the Duluth Project created it, and I think it was just an enormous gift to the field, because it really helped me as an advocate when I was still pretty new in this work, to really understand what it was like to live in that kind of violence. The isolation, the emotional abuse, coercion, intimidation, just all of it is really effective sharing of what it's like to be under that kind of control. And gaslighting is in the section called emotional abuse. So it's always been kind of in our framework. Once survivors started sharing their stories with us, if you listen, you will learn and you will understand better. And if you listen well, you can understand what it is that particular survivor needs to feel safer, to feel more in control. So that's my most important, I think, share with you, is that listening is critical, and then trying to understand the concept by which all of these kinds of tactics that are being used are helping to undermine what should be a really amazing human being and success in their life. So do we have anything we want to jump to?
Well, there's questions about, wait a minute, I've got a chat thing that's up here in front of me. So if the control and power is the issue, do they do it because the abuser's life is out of control and outside of the home, they have no control? So are they just centering all the control that they have in what is in the people that are in their home? I think that's what the question is.
Yeah, like do they use these tactics on other places in their life? Some may, but what I have found to be true is that that an abuser who is really particularly violent and aggressive and undermining and mean can't do that at work and keep their job. It's just they might want to lash out at a coworker, and they might want to call them stupid and ignorant and try to abuse and bully them. But for the most part, people can't keep their jobs if they do that. So they use these tactics in a place where it is possible for them to do it, and where we as a society have not really held them accountable. So we still are not very good at holding abusers accountable for using these kind of tactics against another human being. We just aren't. Even though we've passed a lot of laws, we still make excuses for abusers. We still make excuses for why it is that somebody might be treating people in their family badly. And we have to have this kind of clear line that it is not acceptable for you to treat anybody like this ever. And, you can be angry, you can be frustrated, you can be upset, you can be disappointed, you can be heartbroken. There's a lot of feelings you can have. It is never acceptable for you to respond for having those feelings with hurting another person, either emotionally or physically. That is not acceptable. We just aren't there yet. And so abusers tend to use the power at the level they can get away with it. And for the most part, their family is a pretty safe target, unfortunately, still. So that's my feeling and my experience about that.
And the long-term effects of gaslighting in regards to diagnosable disorders in the survivor, where do you see the overlap in addressing challenges of separating mental health issues with domestic violence issues?
So there are long-term health issues and there are long-term mental health issues, and those two things are different but connected. So, for instance, the mental health issues might be depression, bipolar disorder, those kinds of things, suicidal ideation, those kinds of things. The healthcare issues are more about what the research has shown is that long-term chronic health issues that develop as a result of living under trauma. And this is a result of the great ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. If you don't know that study, you should get information about it, at least a summary of it, because I think it's one that could be really helpful to us as we're working in advocacy with victims of domestic violence and child abuse to understand what the long-term health issues might be. It's heart disease, diabetes, asthma, hypertension. Those are all things. And then there's traumatic brain injury. If it's physical violence involved as well, there's TBI, that are all long-term healthcare issues, not just mental health issues. So I think we have to look at the whole person and their long-term chronic health issues that may arise from this. And the more we can understand them, the more we can help the victim understand them and start to mitigate the damage. Because once you've lived through trauma, it's going to be there. The results are going to be there on some level, but we can certainly reduce or mitigate the damage that's done if we help them understand that's a potential down the road. And so make sure you tell your healthcare provider that, I lived with an abuser for 10 years. And so maybe some of this that's coming up now as a result of that, tension and stress that I lived in and I didn't have control over. So I think it's important for us as advocates and healthcare providers to really understand what living in trauma means and how we understand people's ability to recover from that and how much you can recover, and what you may have to adapt because you can't recover fully. That's my feeling about that. So gaslighting isn't usually a singular thing that happens. It's usually a kind of a card deck of options that an abuser might pull. Physical, sexual, religious, financial, verbal, psychological, emotional, all of those are things that are part of the deck of tactics that an abuser might pull from at any point in time to try to keep the victim off balance. it's just constantly telling them they're not remembering correctly, that never happened, that I don't know why you said that. I said, why did you tell that person that? That's not true, or you're trying to make me look bad, or I mean, it's just constantly hearing that messaging, and undermining a person's perspective of who they are and what they are capable of. It can have a long-term effect. And so I think anytime you encounter somebody who is experiencing or exhibiting those kinds of perspectives about themselves that feels off, that doesn't feel right, it's like, I don't think that's true about this person. If you're saying that to yourself, if you're feeling like, man, they seem to be really underestimating themselves. If you having that conversation yourself, try to have it out loud with them in some fashion. Like, well, I see a really strong human being here. Is there a reason why you're feeling incapable right now? Just trying to engage with them in a way that will start to give you more information about whether or not this is an internal message from maybe childhood, or whether this is somebody reinforcing something constantly on a daily basis that is undermining and eroding them in their perspective. Do you have anything that you'd like to jump in with?
Sorry. Yeah, they would just like, somebody would like more information on Evan Stirk. They're not able to find him on Google.
It's Stark, S-T-A-R-K.
S-T-A-R-K. There
Evan,
you go.
E-V-A-N-S-T-A-R-K. Evan Stark.
Okay.
I think he's originally from Scotland, but I'm not sure. That may be Dobosh. But anyway, yeah, Evan Stark has some coercive control. If you put in coercive control, you might be able to find it as well. But yeah, it's got good information to help us.
Want to combine the next one? It says, can you speak to when children become involved in gaslighting? When it's occurring to them or they're watching it, mimicking it, and any links to Munchausen by proxy?
Well, I don't know enough about Munchausen's by proxy to talk in some, it's only a personal opinion. Munchausen's by proxy, I think, is real in some fashion, but I think it's probably overutilized. And I think particularly it may be overutilized in custody cases when an abuser tries to make it appear that their victim is harming the children so they can gain control. So I think, anytime that there are questions of abuse, when custody comes up, the research has clearly shown now that that the whole system tends to undermine what the mom is saying, usually mom, what the mother is saying, and it falls in line with what the father is saying. So custody, particularly custody, is hard, and I think abusers are really good at getting the children, some of them, engaged in also undermining mom's ability to remember, saying things as, well, your mom, she's always forgetting things, or she's always losing things, or, your mom, she says things that aren't true. That's not true about me. I do think that the kids can be used as weapons in this case and can be taught to be really effective in the use of gaslighting. And so I do think that it's something that you may have to address if you're working with both a mom and a kid, to have sessions with the kid, if the mom allows, to really start to talk about where that information is coming from, and do they really believe that about the mom, and those kinds of things. Because I think that if there are children present, the kids get utilized in a variety of different ways to undermine the mother's control of and potential custody of their children. So it makes it really hard when there's kids involved.
And last one, do you find that abusers who do practice gaslighting tend to just constantly get into relationships where they repeat this behavior?
I think they repeat the behavior because with intimate relationships is because their goal is to control, and it's pretty effective. So if all you have to do is just tell somebody something that's not true over and over and over again until they get off balance, that's a really that's a low energy way of maintaining control. You don't have to exert any more energy than just you're stupid, you're crazy, you forget, you're always losing things, you never remember, right? If that's all you have to do and you can maintain control, it's pretty effective. And I would be surprised if they didn't use it over and over and over again, because the point is to maintain control. And so I think that yeah, they would repeat it as often as they needed to in future relationships.
Thank you.
Sure.
Should we go ahead with the video, or would you like to?
Yeah, it's just where the video is.
Yes, yeah, I'll go ahead and share that real quick.
Great, thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley. So as you saw, the warning signs can be a variety of different things. What the hotline kind of identified as these kind of categories of things. And like I said, I think they're particularly effective. So how do you survive gaslighting? I think the reality is, and maybe this comes to the question that was earlier about how do we help people. If I'm not remembering that question correctly, please, kind of let me know when I stop here. But I think it's important. Documentation is really important for victims of domestic violence for a lot of reasons, not just gaslighting, but incidences that happen during the day or the week or the month. Keeping a journal of some sort that you can safely keep away from your abuser, whether it's making notes on your phone and then sending it to a safe Dropbox kind of idea where you start having a running record of things that have happened that you want to make sure you keep track of and that you can share with other people to say, does this look right? Does this, this is what happened and this is what the abuser said to me. And it's like, does that make sense to you? And, here's how I feel about it. Are you having the same reaction? Is having something that you can like start to create some kind of a progression of time and interactions that feel off to you. Because anytime you can keep any kind of a record, it makes your case, if you want to take it legal, it makes your case stronger because and having corroborating evidence that you've had this conversation with somebody else at this point in time about this incident, it starts to make it harder for people to discount you. Share information if you've got a friend or a coworker that you can share information with, that you feel safe talking to. Just share what this happened to me this morning. I'm feeling kind of off about it, and I just wanted to know, here's what happened. What do you think? Getting somebody else to kind of reinforce that your perspective is probably an accurate one. If you can get access to a domestic violence advocate or a trauma-informed therapist, I think it's really important that therapist be someone who understands the impact of trauma and can help you more effectively. I think that objective support is really helpful. And then, meditation is always a good thing. That survivors of domestic violence seem to feel like meditation and sometimes yoga can help them, because one of the things that I think abusers do really effectively is they separate you from who you are. They put blocks in the way for you to access who you are and what your strength is. And so the more that you can internalize and go back in and try to get a sense of yourself and feed that and grow that, the stronger it will make you when the next wave of attack comes up. So I think it's important to have that kind of whatever that is. I mean, for some people it might be running, for some people it might be knitting, for some people it might be listening to comforting music. I don't know. There's something that about if you can just shut things out and kind of regroup and reconnect with yourself without these other external forces trying to identify for you who you are. That sense of self, strengthening that sense of self might be a helpful thing to do. So meditation is one of those things that can help with that. So I'll stop for a minute and see if I answered that question. If not, I'll try to do more on that.
No, I think you did. I did. Thank you.
Okay, great. That's good.
Well done.
Thank you. And again, I'll say shout out to survivors who trusted me with their lives and with their stories, because that's what I'm pulling from, is that information that they gave me. So that's, they've made me such a better advocate. I can't tell you. So here are references that we have that we pulled from to give you this information. In addition to for my 30 plus years of working in this field, amazing survivors and advocates who have been just really helpful teachers to me, and I'm so thankful for you all for joining us and for being willing to learn a little bit more so that you can help reduce the violence in your communities. Because really, that's what I think our goal should be, is making our community safer. The way we make our community safer is that when people go home, they need to feel safe. If you feel safe at home, you're going to be much less likely to perpetrate violence in the community. And so step one, safe homes. So thank you all for joining us. If there are other things you want me to address or talk about, I think we're close. We're close to the end, but I'm sure we have some time for questions. So.
I'm sorry, I can't get out of this one screen. I apologize. I've got all these chats in front of it and I can't get, okay. Sugar. Some folks were wondering why the courts, since the courts have educated professionals speaking to the damage about mental and emotional abuse done by abusers, what is your feeling about why they tend to bypass this information?
Well, my experience is that courts don't use trained advocates. What they use are people who say they're trained advocates. So, there are psychologists and psychiatrists who have kind of made a cottage industry out of being an expert witness, quote unquote, but they're not trauma informed. They haven't ever worked for a second in a domestic violence shelter. So in my opinion, they may be trained, but they're not educated about trauma. And a domestic violence advocate in a local community is probably the best expert a court could bring in. And there has been research that's been done around that. I am not going to remember the name of the research that showed that to be true, but it was a Department of Justice study that was done either for Office of Victims of Crime or Office of Violence Against Women, research on experts and domestic violence. And what that research showed was that advocates in local communities, advocates from domestic violence programs, were far better experts in court cases than some of these people who had PhDs and MDs as psychiatrists. And that makes sense to me. I mean, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I didn't get much further than that, but I wasn't taught anything at all about the trauma and family violence impact. I might have had a course that had a day or a session on it, but it was the domestic violence shelter that I came to my first job in this field, where that's where I got my education. I learned about what the impact was. So I don't think the courts use real experts. I think they've created experts, or they use people who say they're experts who really aren't.
Getting so many thank yous from folks all over saying